Hi, kindergarten. Today we're going to talk about words describing the continent of Antarctica, and then we're going to find out their opposites. Just to remind you, describing words are called adjectives, and they tell you more information about something. It could be the way they look, the way they smell, how they feel. There are describing words in both Africa and Antarctica. Do you think the describing words in Antarctica will be the same or different as the describing words in Africa? Why or why not? You can tell a learning partner, a stuffed animal, or just tell your brain. These describing words will be very different. Africa and Antarctica are very different continents. The words we will use to describe them will be very different too. So let's listen closely to hear some describing words about Antarctica. What describing word do you hear? Rockhoppers live by the rocky shore. The describing word in that sentence was rocky. The shore is rocky. Now, what is the opposite or the most different word from rocky? Look at that picture of the rocks. Do you see how rough they are? The opposite of rocky is smooth. Look at these rocks. They have no jagged edges. They would be smooth and soft to touch. Rocky is the opposite of smooth. What describing word do you hear? Antarctica has tall mountains. The describing word was tall. Antarctica has tall mountains. Now, what do you think the opposite of tall is? The opposite of tall is short, like this little character. He's short in the picture. Tall is the opposite of short. What describing word do you hear? Antarctica has thick sheets of ice. The describing word was thick. Antarctica has thick sheets of ice. Look at the picture of the ice. See how thick it is? What is the opposite of thick? The opposite of thick is thin. Like this book is much thinner. It is not as thick as the other book. So thick is the opposite of thin. What describing word do you hear? Giant ice chunks can break off into the ocean. The describing word here is giant. Giant ice chunks break off into the ocean. What is the opposite of giant? Tiny. The opposite of giant is tiny. Giant is the opposite of tiny. Let's review describing words. These are called adjectives. They tell you more info about something, like how they look, see, how they touch, how you feel them, what color they are, how big or small they are. And describing words can have opposites. What is the opposite of rocky? Smooth is the opposite of rocky. What is the opposite of tall? Short is the opposite of tall. What is the opposite of thick? Thin is the opposite of thick. And what is the opposite of giant? Tiny is the opposite of giant.